وغضب الله عليهم ولعنهم وأعد لهم جهنم وساءت مصيرا ولله جنود السماوات والأرض وكان الله عزيزا حكيما إنا أرسلناك شاهدا وبشيرا ونذيرا لتؤمنوا بالله ورسوله وتعزروه وتوقروه وتسبحوه بكرة وأصيلا الذين يبايعونك إنما يبايعون الله يد الله فوق أيديهم فمن نكث فإنما ينكث على نفسه ومن أوفى بما عاهد عليه الله فسيؤتيه أجرا عظيما. Okay, Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, Salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man walahu wa ba'd. Allahumma alimna ma yanfa'una wa anfa'na bima 'allamtana wa zidna 'ilman ya Rabbil alamin. Allahumma Rabbi yassir wa 'ain ya Kareem wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. So today we're going to continue with our series on the Hanbali school. And as he said, this has been a broad overview of many different facets that I think are sometimes elusive or even unknown to some people. So I hope that you all have been benefiting. Alhamdulillah, a friend messaged me and had very encouraging words. He said this is the kind of thing that he would have loved to have had when he was in his 20s. And I found, I was very grateful to him for that. So, Jazakallah khairan. We'll take the questions at the end, and we'll see how long it goes. I think, as we get closer to the end, we have session 10, and then, yes, we will add sections on Turuq al-Tafaqquh, how the methodologies that are used in studying the madhab. Also on the books of Usul al-Fiqh and the books of al-Qawa'id al-Fiqhiyya and the books of Aqidah. That will start next week, inshallah ta'ala. I'm thinking at section 10, we might actually have to split it into two, and that's just because of the detail that is in there. Wa alaikum assalam, Carlos. Wa alaikum assalam, Diamond. Okay, so Bismillah, let's begin. So what are we going to cover today? How to issue a Hanbali fatwa. And let's go here to talk about what are the components of a fatwa. We've talked about the skill set necessary to go into a fatwa, the prerequisite knowledge, both of the texts, of the evidences, of the rationale, of the statements of the Imam and the Ashab and the Mu'tamad of the Madhab. And we talked about the skill set that the Mufti needs, in addition to the ideas of ijtihad. We talked about the process that he should follow. And we talked about the repository of information that he draws from. Today, we're going to talk about the actual fatwa. Like, what does it look like? So we can divide up a fatwa into recommended components and essential components. And instead of going over all of the recommended and all of the essential, I'm going to label everything that's essential EC and everything that's recommended RC. And that'll be next to the idea. So there are things that absolutely must be present in order for this fatwa to been issued properly, and there are other things that are recommended for clarification and other reasons. So let's talk about that. Okay, this is a fatwa that is taken from the Rasail and the Fatawa of Sheikh Muhammad ibn Ibrahim. And I think that it was very interesting. It's a very interesting fatwa. And I'm gonna read it in Arabic, then in English, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. ذكر في فتاويه رحمه الله تعالى لا بأس باستعمال مكبر الصوت الميكروفون في الآذان وخطبة الجمعة والعيدين من محمد ابن إبراهيم إلى المكرم نظر ابن محمد الباكستاني سلمه الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته، وبعد، فقد جرى الاطلاع على استفتائك الموجه إلينا عن حكم استعمال المكبر الميكروفون في الآذان وخطبة الجمعة والعيدين، والجواب: لا بأس باستعماله إذا دعت الحاجة إلى استعماله كتباعد البيوت بحيث لا يبلغهم الأذان، أو ازدحام المسجد بالمصلين بحيث لا يتم سماع خطبة الجمعة لبعضهم إلا باستعماله، إذ الأصل في الأشياء الإباحة حتى يرد ما ينقل ذلك الأصل. وبالله التوفيق، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. وهنا يعني رقم الإشارة أو رقم الملف, and we'll read it in English now. It's mentioned in his fatawa, may Allah have mercy on him. This is Sheikh Muhammad ibn Ibrahim. There is no harm in using a loudspeaker microphone for the adhan and for the Friday and Eid sermons. Muhammad ibn Ibrahim writes to the Honorable Nadar ibn Muhammad al-Pakistani, may Allah protect him, peace be upon you and Allah's mercy and his blessings. Furthermore, we have reviewed your inquiry directed to us regarding the ruling on using an amplifier microphone for the adhan and the sermons of Friday and Eid. And the response is, there is no harm in using it if there is a need for its usage, such as when houses are distant enough that the adhan does not reach them, or when the mosque is crowded with worshippers to the extent that some of them cannot hear the Friday sermon unless it is amplified. The principle in things is permissibility until there is an evidence that alters this principle. With Allah lies success, peace be upon you. And then he mentions the reference number. Now, what's very interesting to read these types of documents is that I listened to someone today who said that America is only 3 people old. So the 10th president of the United States, I believe it was James Tyler, was born. He was born at the I believe during the Constitutional Convention, and he had a son when he was in his 60s, and that son had a son when he was in his 70s, and that grandson now is in his 70s. And he made a point. This point is not the story. The point that he made in the video was history is much more recent than we think. Many times when we read things like this, you might see the type of print that's in this fatwa. You might thinking, why are people talking about microphones? Like, why is that even an issue? And this is something that I tell my students frequently. In order to be a good student of fiqh, you have to learn time travel. You have to be open to traveling back in time in your mind and understanding people in their circumstances, not yours. And this is a big problem as well when people jump the gun in asking questions. It's even a bigger problem when a lot of people are, they say, I'm a student of knowledge. I'm a student of knowledge. Seeking knowledge. And in reality, all of their questions are really centered around common things that only common people really need. They're not asking about usul al-ilm. They're not asking about fundamentals of knowledge. They're asking about, how does this apply to me? So we have a very selfish and sometimes entitled idea of learning. And we think that's we're learning. In reality, what we're doing is just seeking a fatwa for our personal situation. So what is my point behind this? My point is that, is it possible for you to think of a time in your life when there were no microphones? Is it possible for you to think of a time in your life when there were no cell phones? I mean, I remember watching Star Trek as a child, and, the most amazing thing was they had the handheld, communication a device that they could, hit a button, call somebody in space. You know, these types of things many times out of sight, out of mind, and we read a fatwa like this and we say, this is so clear. Like, how could no one even understand this? So why don't you, take yourself, travel back in time and think to yourself, I live in a neighborhood where there's no masjid. Or I'm sorry, there's a masjid, there's no microphone. I enter the masjid, I'm just listening to the imam's recitation, and if I'm lucky, the masjid has acoustics and I can hear if I'm far. If it doesn't have great acoustics, then I'm out of luck. And somebody says, hey, there's this device that if you hook it up and you plug it into this new thing called electricity, that the electricity, which God knows what that is, will put power into it, and it will make your sound echo far away. Now, what could be the possible problem with this fiqhiyan? What do you all think? What could be the possible problem with this from a fiqh perspective? What would you all think? Why would there be a possible problem? Okay. Kareem says, this could also have a second order fiqh implications, like the compulsory prayer of jama'ah. This excellent, excellent, excellent point, Kareem. What do you mean by second order fiqh implications? Give us a little bit more detail. Excuse me for that. This is exactly what I'm looking for. What do you think, Kareem? What's the second order fiqh implications that could arise by having a microphone? And what do you mean by second order? This gives me time to drink more of my, I think they call it golden milk, golden tea, something like that. Okay. If people were further away or far away even, if they hear the adhan, it would not or could be fard on them to attend. Yes, this is exactly correct. So the idea here is that if I don't hear the adhan, then I'm not obligated to come to the Salat al-Jama'ah. Or would not. Yes, I see the correction. So it would not or would be fard on them to attend. So if I hear the adhan, not only do I have to attend the prayer, but I should be attending the prayer in the masjid that I hear the adhan from. This is the first assumption. So if that's the consideration, imagine, I was just talking to my students last night. I had a friend who was an eye surgeon in Saudi Arabia, and he did eye surgery on someone who used to walk 7 or 8 kilometers to Jumu'ah. He lived in a small village, like little community, like a few houses and a water well in the middle of the desert. And he would walk. He was functionally blind. The only thing that he could see were the different shades of light. I guess he had like cataracts or something like that. And he is able to memorize his way to Jumu'ah because of the shade of the rocks and the way that the sun hit the rocks and the way that the elevation went up and down from the shading. So he would walk 7 or 8 kilometers to get to Jumu'ah. He's an old man. He lived on his own. I mean, it tells you about dedication, right? But the question is, if that person was that far and there was no microphone, how far would the adhan really reach? I think that's a really interesting question to explore. Myself and Abdullah Mu'taz a while back, we were talking about some of the ahadith of like the size of Aisha radiallahu anha's house and how she described the way the sun would hit the back wall at Asr time. And that gives us an indication about when the Prophet ﷺ was praying Asr in Medina. Like, I wonder if we could like model that, like, you know, how far would the adhan reach based on the height of the mi'dhana and you know, there being no amplification. But the principle that Kareem is mentioning is what I'm looking for. And that is the idea that hearing the adhan, excuse me, like a blind man came to the Prophet ﷺ, the hadith is in Muslim, I believe. And he said, I have no one to take me to the masjid. And the Prophet ﷺ said, Atasma'u nida. Do you hear the call to prayer? He said, yes. He said, Idhan ajibhu. In that case, then answer it. So is it at times, you know, would a person need to still walk all that way if it meant that walking became a hardship because now the sound is reaching further? So that's a question that we have to ask ourselves. And it's, you know, it's not about the idea of, you know, were they just Luddites and backwards and they didn't want technology? But there were implications for using this technology. And I think it's actually fascinating to go to masjids where there are no microphones and pray there. And I've prayed in a few when I lived in Saudi Arabia. I prayed in a one masjid in Sih, an area of Medina known as the Sih. I lived there for a short time as well. No microphones, just concrete block walls and a zinc top, and maybe some bad carpet on the dirt ground, on the dirt floor. Another time near Masjid al-Mustarah, we went there, and wallahi is like, you know, traveling back in time 1400 years. You really gain an appreciation for the salah when you're praying in those conditions. One time on the way to Umrah, stopping at a roadside masjid that was really nothing more than adobe brick and a dirt floor and a thatch roof. But notice, people were worried. Well, if we install a microphone, number one, are we obligating people to do something that they were not obligated to do? Are we then causing a hardship on them? And then number three, and perhaps, you know, this was maybe more one of the more far-fetched reasonings, but is the sound that you hear the actual sound of the mu'adhin, or is it a simple amplification or reflection of that sound? This is just like the debate about pictures in fiqh, right? Are photographs the same as surah? So, la'anallahu al-musawwirin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cursed the musawwirin. But is this the same as photographs? Well, the Arabic language indicates, or the usage of the Arabs when they first saw photos, is that it doesn't necessarily mean surah. Why? Because when the Bedouins first saw photographs, they didn't call them surah. They didn't say hadihi surati. This is my picture. They used to call them ukus, reflections. Hada aksi. This is my reflection. And the only difference is the reflection was captured somehow instead of being faint and going away. Okay, so this is the fatwa from Sheikh Muhammad ibn Ibrahim. Notice that he mentions his name. He mentions who sent it to him. He sends salam. He mentions that, he reiterates the question in the answer. He then gives his response of the ruling, the reasoning why, and the principle. And then he ends with a reference number. Okay, so let's look at these 9 components that are mentioned here in the fatwa. Number 1 is there's a title to distinguish the topic. Number 2, there's a mentioning of the mufti and the mustafti, the responder and the appellant. There's greetings, requisite greetings, or the basmala per the context. There's reference to the original inquiry. Number 5, there's a response with the ruling in brief, then the details. There's adding examples for similar situations, which weren't asked about, but were included. Then there's mentioning of the evidence, either a dalil or a ta'lil, the textual evidence or the rational evidence, ending with greetings and dua for success, and then a reference number. Okay, so which of these are recommended and which of these are essential? So out of these 9 points, we have 5 of them which are essential, and the others are recommended. So a title, recommended. Mentioning who the mufti was and who the person asking the question was, this is essential. And this is actually one of the problems with a lot of fatwa material or things that are responsa that are mentioned, about in the form of fatwa, is that sometimes they, oh well, this is what the XYZ website said, and you have no idea who wrote it, who researched it, who the team is. It's the problem that I have with Muslim projects in general, is they don't want to put their names on things and they don't want to make it public. And if you stand by your work, you should put your name on it. So with fatwa, this becomes an even bigger issue, right? So there should be requisite greetings or the basmala, right? So the person greeted with salam, you return their salam. If you're starting off a new letter, you would say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, as كل أمر ليس فيه بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فهو خداج كما ورد. So the things that don't start with the basmala are deficient. إنه من سليمان وإنه بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. We know that the Prophet ﷺ would also begin all of his letters with the basmala or with the salam. Then there would be a reference to the original inquiry. This is essential. Otherwise, no one knows what you're talking about. There's a response in brief, then details. There's adding examples with similar situations. This is what they call in ilm al-balagha al-jawab al-hakim. The people came to the Prophet ﷺ, Ya Rasulullah, inna lanarkabu al-bahr wa nahmilu ma'ana al-qalila min al-ma' in sharibnahu lam natawadda wa in tawadda'na bihi 'atishna afa natawadda'u bima' al-bahr. The hadith of Abu Hurairah, which is found in the Sunan. We are people that ride the ocean. We ride the seas. We carry with us a little bit of water. If we drink it, we can't make wudu. And if we make wudu with it, then we will go thirsty. Can we make wudu with seawater? The Prophet ﷺ said, Huwa tuhuru ma'uhu al-hillu maytatu. It is, water is pure and its carrion are permissible. So he added to the answer that he gave. Wabisa, radiallahu anhu, came. The Prophet ﷺ, he said to him, "Tas'alni am ukhbirak?" Would you like to ask me, or should I tell you what you came to ask? He said, no, you tell me. Imagine, Wabisa came all that way to meet the Prophet ﷺ, to the point that he actually walked over the shoulders of people that were sitting close to him because he didn't want to lose the opportunity to ask. The Prophet ﷺ said, you want to ask, or do you want me to tell you? He said, no, you tell me. Imagine, subhanAllah. The Prophet ﷺ says, جئت لتسأل عن البر أو جئت تسأل عن البر كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم قال رضي الله عنه أجل. He said, you've come to ask about righteousness. Wabisa said, that's right, I did. قال صلى الله عليه وسلم البر حسن الخلق. Righteousness is good character. And then he increased him and he said, والإثم ما حاك في صدرك وخشيت أن يطلع عليه الناس. And sinfulness is that which shakes around in your chest and you're afraid of people finding out about. So adding to the question, adding to the answer with relevant, beneficial details is part of a good fatwa, but it's not essential. All you really have to do is tell them the hukum. You don't even have, you should mention the dalil or the ta'lil when relevant. And that is part of the recommended point. So see, that's in it says RC, but it's mudallal, it's what do you call it? Highlighted. So it's highlighted because while it is highly recommended, at times it's not appropriate to mention the dalil, especially if you think that the dalil, mentioning the dalil to the person, is going to make them question themselves more and not take action. And if you notice from the person that they are mu'anid, that they are hard-headed, and they're only coming to argue, the only responsibility you have is to tell them what they need to do. And this is one of the benefits that I took from Sheikh Abdullah Martez, who mentioned, that his father used to say to him, Sheikh Martez al-Halaq used to say, the responsibility of the people, the responsibility of answering people is to give them the answer. It is not to do the work for them. So somebody comes to ask you, what is the ruling on paying zakat on my IRA? If it's a traditional IRA, there's no zakat. If it's a Roth IRA, there's zakat on the contributions. But how do I calculate it? Where's my Excel sheet? That's not the mufti's responsibility. If he chooses to give you that additional information, to walk you through that information, to do it for you, that's his choice. But it is your responsibility as a mukallaf, as a person who is legally responsible for his own actions, to is reasonably to responsible on is legally responsible for his actions, is it is their responsibility to apply the information. Okay, then you end with the greeting of success and a reference number. Okay, let's go forward. Okay, so what are these essential components? The essential components are those that identify the parties, the rulings for communication. They refer to the original question. They mention the ruling. Notably, here we said the evidence, whether textual or rational, is not essential, as the mufti here is a mujtahid and the mustafti is a muqallid, and it's not required to provide an evidence to muqallid. Instead, the muqallid's yaqeen is in the response of the mufti, not in the evidence the mufti uses. Because even with that evidence, he may not be able to understand. And, I've heard this story time and time again. I've heard it directly from one person who said it happened in front of him. He was at a lecture. Somebody mentioned something, and, he mentioned a hadith. Someone said, what's the isnad for that hadith? And then the sheikh said, oh, the isnad is so-and-so from so-and-so who said so-and-so for said so-and-so who said, I was informed by so-and-so that this is the hadith. And he said, "Are you satisfied with that?" He said, "Yeah, I'm satisfied. I'm satisfied." He said, "Well, I'm glad you're satisfied because those are my neighbors that live in my neighborhood. I haven't memorized the isnad of the hadith. But even if I had told it to you, you wouldn't have been able to ascertain whether it was correct or not. So why are you asking?" It becomes an issue of inad sometimes, where a person is demanding of information that they themselves cannot process. So that goes back to the idea of fitna, the idea of the uh, the um, the acumen of the mufti in determining how he should answer something. Okay, so as we said, these are this is the idea of the fatwa, right? What we want to do now is we're going to go through a summary of the etiquette of the mufti, which is found in Ibn Hamdan's Sifat al-Fatwa wal-Mufti wal-Mustafti, which is a main book on the issue of fatwa in the Hanbali school. So he says, and this is just a summary. There's a lot of information here, but these are the ru'us al-aqlam, the main points. A mufti's response to inquiries. The mufti should clarify inquiries either orally or in writing. If a translation is needed due to the inquirer's language, it must be done reliably. The mufti can elaborate on the question if necessary and should cover all aspects relevant to the situation of the person asking the question. Now, a point about translation. Some scholars consider the idea of translation to be a form of shahada, a form of testimony, and therefore they would demand that there were two translators to review any translation to make sure that accurate information was being given to the mufti and that the meanings that were being conveyed were conveyed accurately. And I've seen that myself live, where someone asks a question, let's say, for example, in English. And in English, we can be much more direct with asking certain things. And in Arabic, those things are not asked directly because they're considered to be private. And the answer changes based upon the language used, which is why some things should not be asked in public. And instead, they should be written down and sent in writing or asked privately, as not every question should be asked in front of everyone. This is a big problem that people, no, this is the knowledge. We have to put it out there. It is the knowledge. But there are certain things that to prevent other people from following or from being tested through hearing the question, the possibility that somebody even did something, as erroneous or bad or salacious or whatever, it should not be asked publicly. Number 2, understanding the inquiry. The mufti should strive to comprehend the inquiry, especially complex and unclear parts. He should revise the inquiry for clarity and rectify any errors or ambiguity for the benefit of the fatwa, which means that he should ask questions before answering. Meaning, I think I told you all of my one time, speaking with Sheikh Abdullah ibn Aqil, and I said, Sheikh, fi baladina, kada, 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 kada. Sheikh, in our country, this and this and this. He said, hold on, what country are you from? The Sheikh knows me. But he said, what country are you from? From America. Okay, then when you ask a question, you say, Sheikh, in America, I'm from America, this happens. That way, the person who's answering you knows what you're asking about. It's part of good etiquette. It's not anything about the, pride in your country or anything like that. You're simply giving the person that's going to answer your question context. Al-hukm ala shay fara'un an tasawwurihi. The principle is a ruling is contingent on how well you can conceptualize it. So if you do not present accurate information to a mufti, and that mufti does not have time to get clarity from you, then the onus of presenting correct information falls on you because you're the one that needs the answer. Which means that sometimes when a question comes to you, And this is not to coach the answer, but it is to coach the level of information that's necessary for answering it. Okay. Where are you from? Okay. How old were the people that were involved? What situations have they been in before? Okay. Did you have this? Did you have that? No, I did not. Now the mufti can start to decide whether or not, how this is handled and how that is handled. Consultation and issuing fatwas. It's recommended for the mufti to consult with other jurists and scholars, even if they're junior, while formulating a response, unless the content is sensitive or could negatively impact the inquirer. So there should always be consultants. And, you have kind of concepts, if you look throughout Islamic history, you had a social class at one time, those al-mustasharin, the consultants. They were a social class that were kind of between the rulers and the common people. They were not official government positions, but they were considered to be people of prominence and importance who had their pulse on society, but also were respected by the authorities and could kind of navigate those two places. And they were able to convey meanings and sentiments that maybe weren't specific to just one person. You'll find in the books of Qada that the fuqaha will mention that, the qadi, the judge, he should have a'wan, he should have, helpers. So those who are scribes for him that write down the proceedings, those who gather the papers, those who look up issues in fiqh. He should have, some of the fuqaha that come and attend his majalis at times, and that he can turn to and ask for substantiation of certain things at times. Now, the only time this shouldn't be done is if the content is sensitive. It might be time sensitive, it might be information sensitive, and that could negatively impact the person who's asking the question. Privacy and the ethics of privacy are very, very important. And this is something that, again, in many communities, we find kind of faltering. Somebody goes to the imam of the masjid, trying, him and his wife are trying to get advice about issues that they're having. And then, they finish with the sheikh, and then they come back at Salat al-Isha, and the sheikh's going, yeah, today brother so-and-so came to me to talk to me about, his wife. And this is what I said. It's completely unethical. I'm not saying that it happens a lot, but it does happen at times. So it's very important to anonymize and not give information about specific situations so that you do not embarrass or uncover anyone's sins. Man satara ala muslimin satara Allahu alayhi yawm al-qiyamah. Whoever covers another Muslim, Allah will cover them on the day of judgment. Writing fatwas and being clear in writing that. Responses should be written clearly and understandably for a general audience, with attention to layout and legibility to avoid misinterpretation. You should not be using words that can be interpreted in one way or another based upon cultural contexts, unless that cultural context is clear to everyone you're talking to. So in a funny incident, when like TV fatwas first, fatwa shows first started popping up, call in fatwa shows. Oh, so we're going to have a TV show. So people are going to call in. They're going to ask their questions. So a woman from Egypt calls a fatwa show in Saudi Arabia. And يا شيخ بيني وبين زوجي مشاكل. أعمل له إيه? Me and my husband were having problems. What should I do about him? The sheikh, he says in his Saudi accent, Sahiri, do magic on him. What does he mean? He means use your feminine charm. This woman hears it and she says, ايه ده يا شيخ؟ يعني عمل له سحر. What's that, sheikh? You like I should go do magic? So they had, so the host she was saying, Sheikh, perhaps you mean to use feminine charms. And yes, that's what I mean. And they cleared it up. But the problem comes as in lack of clarity, whether in writing or in reading. So try to be very clear with how you're answering questions. Also, and I think this is very important, lack of clarity in ideas and presentation is many times a key sign that that person probably shouldn't be answering a question, which means that they are too junior to actually understand how to answer a question, or they have they do not have the requisite information and come to a conclusion on themselves, and maybe even sometimes the requisite humility. It is not a fatwa for somebody to go, some ulama say this, and some ulama say that, and I'm just going to tell you what everybody has said, and then you make up your mind. That's fitna. That's not fatwa. You're causing problems for people. You're not answering their questions. There's a difference between a debate and dialogue in a classroom setting and answering questions in a way that people will make things actionable. And what this has led to is it led to a lot of people who honestly should not be opining on issues in fiqh being considered great scholars because they can regurgitate lots of information. And it led to the people that they regurgitate that information to also regurgitating it while not understanding it and going off the deep end with what ifs and what abouts. So it's very dangerous. The format of the fatwa response, sometimes people would take, they would take let's say, for example, this paper. Let's say this was the fatwa that was written. And instead of writing separately so that the answer is known, they would write, here in the margin, they would write their fatwa. Or if it was blank on the back, they would write it on the back, right? Or they would write it at the bottom in a way so that the fatwa is connected to the original question. And that's, simply, a operational detail. Conciseness in fatwas. The mufti should provide concise answers, clearly stating that something is permissible or not, right or wrong. In complex cases like leadership or stoning, the details and the conditions should be mentioned. So in context, in issues where there is necessary context and necessary detail, that necessary detail must be mentioned. But if it's not, then they should be decisive. You should not be leaving people with more questions than they came to you with. In issues of inheritance and family issues, specific shares and conditions should be clearly stated following Islamic inheritance laws. Because if you just say to the people, well, in this issue, follow the Islamic inheritance laws, and they have no idea what the Islamic inheritance laws are, they will make up anything, literally. I mean, there's people say, I need you to write an Islamic will for me. Okay, what's the impetus for having a specifically drafted Islamic will? Well, I don't want to give anything to my brothers and sisters. I hate them. And I want to give everything to one of my children, not to all of them. Well, this is clearly not going to be an Islamic will. So mentioning what needs to be in there when it comes to inheritance, family issues, mahramiyah, that type of thing is very important. Responding to incomplete inquiries. If the inquiry is incomplete or vague, the mufti should or indeed must clarify the missing information and respond accordingly. Now, this could be in one of two ways. This could be something where there is a logical sequence of events and or statements where only one or two things could be mentioned. And they say, therefore, when you said this, you either can mean this or this or this, and this is the answer based on that. Or you can say, you might mean this, you might mean that. I would need clarity from you on what you mean by that. A lot of times people can be very hasty in trying to get an answer. And as Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen told us, التباطؤ في الحق خير من التسرع في الجهل. Being slow in getting to the truth is better than or التباطؤ في الحق خير من التسرع إلى الباطل. Being slow and getting the truth is better than going fast towards falsehood. So it's not the end of it. We live in a life now where I send an email, I refresh 2 minutes later, wondering if I got a response. Give people 24 hours, give them 48 hours, give them a week. Not everything is going to happen right away. So in your answers, a mufti should be doing that. Responding to narrow inquiries. If the inquiry is limited in scope, then the mufti should ensure that the response is attached directly to the inquiry to prevent its misuse. So it's a very narrow issue with very specific details. You should not give them an answer detached from those details so that somebody can come and say, the sheikh said XYZ, and then everybody goes and runs with it. This is a big problem like nowadays with claims of darura. Like everything has become a necessity. Oh, why are we doing this? Necessity. Why are we doing that? Necessity. When in reality, not everybody is eligible for a claim of necessity. Responding to fatwas issued by unqualified individuals. If an unqualified person has responded previously, the mufti has the right to correct it, emphasizing the importance of seeking fatwas from qualified individuals. Now, notice this was written by Ibn Hamdan in 695. What would he have said if he lived during our time, where people are on Twitter and TikTok and Facebook and X and YouTube and whatever else, Reddit, answering questions, and the most that they have under their belt is a Google search. Handling contradictory answers. If the respondent disagrees with the provided answer, the mufti should focus on explaining his own interpretation without altering the original inquiry. Meaning that you should not be bending towards the will of the person asking you. You should avoid falling into contradictions with your own question. The only time your answer should be changing is if there is substantive information which was left out before that now becomes and is verified by you, and that has to be verified. Addressing others or addressing errors in other fatwas. So if you find errors in the fatwas from others, you should correct them, especially if those errors contradict conclusive evidence or established doctrine. Somebody comes and says, the reason why we follow this is because this Sahabi, he did this action and he did it in front of other companions, and no one from the companions disagreed with him, and therefore it is ijma'. This person saying this, not knowing that there were other companions who disagreed with him in both statement and action, and there are ahadith that go against that as well. So when clarifying, you want to clarify that no, there's conclusive evidence, an established doctrine that goes against what this person was saying. Now, one thing that's very important is not to be a name dropper when you are asking questions. And this is a big problem where people will come and they'll say, I asked Sheikh so-and-so and he said this. What do you have to say? Well, you got your answer. Why do you need me to answer you? By you kind of being bold-faced and saying so-and-so said this, what do you have to say? There's little that's left to the imagination that you're actually seeking an answer. It seems more often than not that you're just trying to drum up drama, or you're trying to create a challenge, or you're trying to create a rivalry. It's not healthy. And in fact, when we were in Uneza, myself and another group of students with Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen, rahmatullahi alayhi, he said very specifically at the very first Q&A period, La tadhkuru al-asma. Do not mention names of people. Do not come and say, so-and-so said this. What do you have to say? So-and-so, I asked so-and-so this. Ask questions according to their principles. Ask the question that's in your mind, not who you asked it from. Now, you might say to yourself, but I asked that person and they told me something, and I didn't understand it or I thought it was wrong. That's why I'm asking. Then you don't come and go, I asked Joe Bradford and he said XYZ. You would come to the scholar and you would say, Sheikh Jazakallah khairan, I wanted to confirm some information. If it was said that XYZ is applicable in this situation, and here's the situation, would you agree with that or would you have a different answer? So there's a way of going about asking a question that doesn't make you come off as trying to bring, cause issues. Okay. Number 13, responding to ambiguous inquiries. If it's unclear, seek clarification. I think we talked about that enough. Mentioning evidence in fatwas. You should include clear and concise texts as evidence in fatwas, but avoid detailed analogies and inferences unless necessary. Prioritizing inquiries. The Mufti should prioritize inquiries based on the urgency and the need of the inquirers, using methods like drawing lots in case of equal importance. So imagine that, some two people come to you, each one of them, I need an answer by tomorrow. One of them is a case that is dealing with marriage and divorce, and the other one is a case that is dealing with, somebody cleaning najasa off of their clothes. There is obviously more urgency in the one that has to do with marriage and divorce. Two people come, both of them with marriage and divorce. They're equally urgent. What do? Flip heads and tails, draw straws, do something that would allow you to basically start on one of them. Impartiality is very important. Remaining impartial, avoiding bias towards either party in a dispute, and focusing on the legal aspects of the inquiry is very important, which is why it is very important that when answering questions, that if you can refer someone who you have a personal relationship with to someone else, you do so. So someone comes to you and says, Sheikh, brother so-and-so, I really dislike the whole brother sister thing, but I'll use it as an example. Brother so-and-so cheated me out of business. I need your opinion on this. What you should say is very clearly, brother so-and-so is a childhood friend of mine. And while I could hear the issue and I could answer you, I do not want the impropriety or even the insinuation of bias. Therefore, I'm going to refer you to so-and-so who is not friends with him and will be able to have 100% unquestionable impartiality when dealing with him. That's what should be done, or that's what's recommended. Okay. And with that, we've concluded the etiquette of the Mufti. And I think as well, one thing that's very important in this last issue of impartiality is that community members need to remember that the person that you look up to as a religious figure, an imam, a mufti, a sheikh, a scholar, resident scholar, whatever the terms that are used are, is not there at your beck and call to kind of be a endless repository, of a bank of information that you can easily find yourself. But they also have their own emotional state and investment and proclivities. And therefore, when you're asking questions, you should understand when and when not those questions can be answered in a way that is faithful to the principles of fatwa and can be most beneficial for you. So if you are trying to ask questions that would, put them in a bind or alienate them socially, people that are religious in the community are already alienated enough. Like nobody wants to invite the sheikh to certain things because maybe how they joke or how they, they do things. So going and kind of forcing all the problems of the community on someone with the idea that they're here to solve this, and if they didn't want to be doing this, they shouldn't have chose this path. In reality, sometimes you don't need a fatwa. You just need to move on in life, and you need to not be involved in drumming up issues. If it's not directly related to you as a person, many times it's not beneficial for you to be asking about. If it is simply rhetorical or what's the word I'm looking for? If your question is simply rhetorical, or it's not rhetorical, if it's simply theoretical, then you don't have to ask it. And you shouldn't be trying to busy people who may have a lot of other things going on in their life, but are too shy to tell you that they're busy. And that has to do with the culture of the person that you're asking as well. Also, understanding that the person that you ask will differ culturally in your expectations of how they answer the question. What's that famous poet by Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala? اصبر على مر الجفا من معلم فإن علو العلم في نفراته ومن فاته التعليم في what is it? ومن فاته التعليم في شبابه فكبر عليه أربعا لوفاته أو كما ورد عنه. So, have patience in the bitterness of a teacher, and the bitterness that you experience from a teacher, because lofty knowledge is found in his nafarati. I don't even know how to translate that. In his off-puttingness. And whoever misses out on learning when they're young, then make 4 takbirs over them for their death. So I say that to say, understand that sometimes you ask a question. It's not the mufti's job to be nice to you. It's not the mufti's job to make you feel good about yourself. His job is just to give you the answer that's necessary. Now, if he can do all of that, then alhamdulillah, he's a blessed person and he's Rabbani, and we should all strive to be that way. But we also have to be realists here, and we should have to understand what it is that we want and what it is we're seeking. Oh, I got my answer. That's it. I don't need to, oh, that's right, Sheikh. I knew that, but, thank you so much. Or let me ask you follow-ups just so that I can seem like I'm not wasting your time. You're not. Just ask your question and understand what it is that you want from the question. And then the important thing is act according to the question and don't go, fatwa shopping. All right. So that's it for today. Hope it was beneficial. Went longer than I thought, but alhamdulillah, I guess that's all right. And Monday, inshallah ta'ala, we'll meet. We'll talk about 5 examples of practical cases. And then we'll be adding 11, 12, 13, maybe 14. So we'll add like 3 or 4 other lectures here to this series. In fact, I wonder, what did I thought I had actually wrote a list of what I could add. Here it is. Yeah. So I've got, let's see, an extended bio of Imam Ahmed. I think that's necessary. I don't know of anything in the English language about that. Books of Usul al-Fiqh, books of Qawaid al-Fiqhiyya, books of Hadith, books of Aqidah, books of Al-Khilaf al-Ali, of higher disagreement. So one of my favorites is Ru'us al-Masail al-Khilafiyya by al-Ukbari. The books of Al-Mufradat, which is something that we didn't talk about. We alluded to, but these are the unique issues of the Hanabila. There are a number of books that have been written about that. The books of Tabaqat and Tarajum, so the biographies and the biographical encyclopedias. We talked about Turuq al-Tafaqquh, the ways of learning the madhab. And then Kutub al-Fatawa wal Ajza wa ghayriha, books of fatwa, and small treatises and other than that. And so maybe inshallah ta'ala we'll add on to those inshallah ta'ala. So that's about 9 more that we could expand this out to. But yeah, we'll try to keep it going inshallah. I hope that this has been beneficial. If it has, then alhamdulillah. And if it hasn't, then alhamdulillah. And may Allah bless all of you. So what is about when you don't hear the adhan is calling, but when you know it's the adhan time? I'm not sure I understand the question. Walaikum salam. These are questions from there. Let's see. Somebody says, where did you learn Hanbali fiqh in Saudi? I went over a number of my teachers in the last lecture, the lecture before last, but I was in Medina for 8.5 years, and then I was in Riyadh for 3.5 years. I learned with a number of scholars there. Somebody asked the question, is the celebration of Mawlid, is it all halal or bid'ah action? So that's the wrong framing. So there's not something like is something halal or something bid'ah. Regardless, the Mawlid is a bid'ah according to all scholars. All scholars. Those who celebrate it and those who do not. And that's going to be, for some of you, like, no, what do you mean? No scholar says it was a sunnah. You know why? Because it didn't exist during the time of the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam. The issue comes here of how they define bid'ah. Do they say that all bid'ah are rejected, or do they say that there are also good bid'ah? And if they say that there are good bid'ah, do they consider the mawlid to be from one of those, or do they not? So it's a longer discussion, but it's one that I do not believe is to be celebrated and is a bid'ah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Can the fatawa vary when customs are different? Yes, the fatawa can vary when customs are different. The fatawa can vary when the madhab of a people is more predominant. For example, I remember one of my teachers, who was a Hanbali, was approached by someone from Morocco and asked the question about family law. And as we know, Morocco, there's the Maliki school. And so the issue was about Allah, about, wet nursing. And, he said, asked the question, brother, where are you from? Akhi, where are you from? I'm from Morocco. In that case, you need to ask the scholars of your area, as what is acted on in your area is different than what is acted on in ours, based upon the different adillah. So that's very important, to have somebody that's cognizant of the context of the person and when customs can lead to different answers. All right, everybody. I think the other questions are going to kind of open up endless issues. So I'm going to leave those off. But may Allah bless all of you. Inshallah ta'ala, we will see you on Monday. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.